Hello, this is just going to be a quick tutorial on how I color, specifically on mobile phone IBIS Paint. I won't be using any exact fancy brushes. I'll be using airbrush and the basic brush that you are given in IBIS Paint. Once again, this is how I color personally, and not really saying that you need to color it this way or everyone colors this way. This is personally how I color. With all that out the way, let's begin on the tutorial. So what I usually do in the beginning, I do this gray background for where I can actually see the literal white on the sketch. You can do this on a different layer and just shade it black on where you want the shade to be and change the opacity for where it's this gray. So the first coloring, you press a layer to separate with all the different layers, like the outline and the gray background, and then you have the skin. Usually I start with the skin first, and then I go on with other layers, for example the hair, but I have a tendency of focusing on one layer and not having the other layers done, so I try to avoid fixating on one layer just so I can keep my mind grounded and see the full picture of the actual drawing on what I'm coloring. So all the color goes off of one different layer from the outline and the gray background. You can have a choice for where you can have different layers like accessories and skin and hair and clothing, things like that you can have on different layers just so it's more easier, but usually I sometimes put it on one layer depending on the drawing. So once you have your color in, there is a cool trick if you did not know. If you press the button that is called Magic Brush, when you press brush icon at the bottom, the magic brush, you can click a specific segment of the drawing, like a circle or a square or just a shape in general that's sealed, and you can use that magic brush for where whatever you're drawing on that area, it stays in that area so it doesn't get out, so it doesn't look really choppy or whatnot. So right after you're coloring and you're done with that layer, you can put it on a different layer for shading. Now shading works for where you have your actual color and you color palette is shifted more downwards towards the black area. Not fully for where it's fully black, but it still has its color, but it's just a darker shade of that color that you are using. And this is what I usually do for shading, and most people do for shading, instead of using plain black on a simple layer and putting it and changing the opacity. Some people do this, but instead they do it with purple, blue, just shaded cool colors, and that is fine, but it's for where it's just plain black. It looks a little weird to me personally, but it clashes with my art style. This is completely optional, but I like to blur a few shading areas just so it looks smoother, and the areas that are more sharp, more exaggerated, it makes it look nice. It's a pleasing thing to do when you specifically add blur to an area and it slowly turns into the sharp shading that is on top of the actual color. Now the actual steps by coloring each and every layer, you focus on one layer. When you have all of the coloring done, then you go on to the next one. Don't try to do it all at once when you're shading in stuff. Of course, you need your base first, so when you're coloring, don't do it all at once. But when you are actually doing the shading, just so it's cleaner and you can actually focus on what you're doing, try to do it one by one. But once again, when it comes to the basic coloring, get that out the way first and then do the hard work. Now, people usually have a problem trying to figure out what idea is to draw in general. Well, this idea that I had of this drawing, it's like a diner 50s style in a way. I just found this picture on Pinterest and I'm like, dude, I want to draw that. Like, I just want to draw that in my own style. And finding motivation, it takes a while. So with this next step, I like to use the lasso button, and I like to, for where it specifically on the hair, I like to get the airbrush, lasso whatever I want to lasso, usually hair strips, and I do shading and some highlights where I want it to be, just so it looks cleaner and it looks nicer and more appealing to the eye. I add some shading in on the top and highlights at the bottom, and in the middle I'm doing highlights. Now the next step is to go to the normal slip, and it should be like this arrow, and it should give you options on to change your outline or your color on how it works by texture or something like that. I don't know much what all of them do, but it just looks nice. And put all of that on one different layer so it doesn't clashes with the actual layer, and start blurring that out. It looks more appealing and more shaded in within the actual hair. Now this next step is probably my favorite step. You add a new layer on top of and then you press clip that layer. So now that top layer on top of the outline, you can change what color of the outline layer you want it to be. Now I get the airbrush, and I usually pick pink or a dark pink, and I start outlining, or I start adding these cute little variations of pink on the outline just so it looks cleaner. You can also do this with different colors. You can change the color, and if there's a specific area that you don't want to be black outline, you can change it, and it's a little bit more simpler than using the magic brush because it's more cleaner. Now, when the outline is complete, press merge layer down on the right side of your screen where the settings are, and it'll merge all the layers down for where it turns into one layer. I did the colors into one layer, and I did the outline into one layer, just so it's cleaner. Add a few couple details like highlights, whatnot, or add a few things that you need to do, for example, the speech bubble. And then there you have it, a tutorial on how I specifically color.